everybody. Welcome. I'm Josh. This is the Fundraising in Texas AMA, so hopefully you're in the right spot. We're going to do the format of this is that I give a kind of about a 30-minute presentation that's kind of an overview of kind of the basic things that most people want to talk about and think about, and share some of our vision for if you're a startup here in Texas, kind of what you should be thinking about and how you go fundraise. And then the larger part of it is we have a panel up here. We've got Mike, who's going to come join us from Live Oak, who's one of the top venture capital firms here in Texas, and we'll be able to really just open it up and have a conversation and talk about whatever you guys want to go talk about. So that's the basic plan. So hopefully you're in the right place. JP Morgan Chase helps support all these different things that we're doing here, which we really appreciate. Chase is does a million different things. They're like the mega bank. They do small business banking. They do private banking. They take companies public. They do all the do a lot of different things. We use them for all of our banking, just for running Capital Factory. And the biggest reason, honestly, is actually they just have the best online banking, which means we can do everything ourselves without having to talk to anybody. And they have you can delegate access to other people. So personally, that's the thing I like about it the best. But they've been a great partner in that. We appreciate that. So real quickly first, give me an idea of who's here. So who's here for the first time? Awesome. Great, welcome. Anybody here that's a member? A bunch of you. Awesome, great, thanks for coming. No bus today, old line. Anybody recently moved here? A bunch of you, awesome, that's pretty common. This is a side effect of being the fastest growing city in the country. Anybody whose parents are entrepreneurs? Not that many, interesting, often. I just find it to be curious, often there's a lot. Who here is the founder of a startup? Great, most of you. Awesome. Dave, I don't know, you kind of count. It's at a big startup. What about B2C or consumer, selling directly? Bunch, awesome. And then B2B, to businesses, pretty even split. Awesome. And then who's looking for investors? Great, that's a trick question. Hopefully that's why you're here. Awesome, great. Well, sounds like you're all in the right place. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to start off talking about Texas. That's a big part of what we've been focused on for the past year, is thinking about if you're an Austin company, not just Austin, but really what it means to be part of Texas. Because I think if you're here in Austin, you should be taking advantage of all of Texas. And for us, that's this Texas Startup Manifesto. I'll talk a little bit about, from what I've seen of all the companies here, what's kind of the basics of raising a seed round, your first money that's not coming from people that you already know probably, which often is kind of $500,000 to a couple $1 million. I'll go through some lists of things that you'll be able to see afterwards. You don't have to write them down, but just showing you here are all the different resources you can plug into, all the accelerators, which is a big reason why people go to accelerators, is usually because they're raising money. Angel networks, VCs, and other funding sources here in Texas. And then, like I said, the last part will be Mike coming up to join me for the AMA, where we can talk about whatever you guys want to go talk about. And then after that, there's a happy hour in the kitchen, which hopefully you can stay for. I'll be participating in that. I'll go over there for the happy hour, and some of our members will be there too as well. And that's a great place just to be able to chat afterwards. And if you want to tell us about what it is you're working on, we'd love to hear about it and things like that. So this presentation, I'm going to cover a lot of information. I'll probably talk kind of fast because there's a lot to go through. So if you want to write anything down or take a picture of a slide, this is the slide you want to take a picture of, because that link at the top is a link to this whole presentation. And so you can actually cut and paste directly out of it if you want. All of the events that we do here are streamed and recorded on the internet, so there's a little camera mounted on the ceiling up there. And so I don't know if anybody's watching this right now, maybe, if not they'll watch it later, but what that means is we do this every week with different types of talks like this, and all of those are on there. And while my part of the presentation would be really boring to watch over and over again, there's a different venture capitalist up here every time answering questions, and people are asking different questions. And that could be really interesting. And pretty much every venture capitalist in Texas has been sitting up here answering those questions. And so if you're thinking about talking to them or pitching them, you can go listen to what they have to say, which is pretty useful. And then we talk about what's it take to raise your seed round, your first kind of $500,000 to a couple $1 million. That's this post I wrote last year, which I think is still very relevant, the bit.ly/500K 2017. And that goes into that in a lot more detail. And that's most of the people that I meet that are coming here looking to raise money, like that's the if you're not having trouble raising money, figure out what you're missing on this list. It's probably one of those things. So, but I'll talk about that a little bit today too. And then also in the deck, which again you can just go look at online, a bunch of great resources of other stuff on the internet you can go read, because that's the great thing about the internet. There's lots of great stuff out there. So things about fundraising, about how venture capital works, about how startups work. There's a great workshop that happens here once a quarter, put on by one of my partners, Gordon Doherty. It's called Founders Academy. It's over the course of 1 week. It's a lunch series. Gordon is an incredible entrepreneur. He's been part of taking companies public, and he also is just a great teacher, a great educator, and he's developed this curriculum over years of working with lots of companies, and it's everybody that goes to it really finds it really valuable. So something I'd also highly recommend. And then this series that we do every Tuesday, I'm pretty much up here doing something if I'm not in Dallas or Houston or San Antonio. And so this is the first Tuesday of the month, which is in fundraising. That's what most people want to hear about. The second Tuesday of the month, we do an intro to the Austin startup scene. That's a little bit more for anybody that's new to Austin, looking to get a job at a startup, trying to figure out how they plug into all of this. On the third Tuesday of the month, we always do a road trip and we take a bus somewhere else. This month, because of Thanksgiving, we're actually doing it a week early. So next Tuesday, a week from today, we're doing a bus to Dallas, and it's got a retail e-commerce kind of theme or focus to it. And so we're bringing startups and mentors and entrepreneurs from here from Austin up to Dallas for the day. And while we're up there, we'll mix and match with other entrepreneurs and mentors and investors up in Dallas, and then do a bunch of kinds of programming and come on back. And we've been doing that now for over a year, and it's always a really great trip, and real investments come out of it and other things. And that's part of us helping to connect together investors and startups all over the state. And then on the fourth Tuesday of the month, there's a pitch practice session we do. And the idea behind that is if any of you are going to be pitching your startup anywhere, whether it's at some competition or on stage at South by Southwest in front of investors or anything, you can get up in front of a small group here of friendlies and practice your pitch and get up and give it, and have people that see a lot of pitches give you some feedback to try to help make sure you go do your best. So for us, these are all ways that we get to meet all the people we want to go meet anyway, right? Because I get emails every day from people that say, hey, I'm fundraising, I want to learn more about Capital Factory, how can we help? And I can say, oh great, I've got this thing just for you. It's the intro to fundraising. Next Tuesday, come to that. Or it's, I just moved to Austin and I'm looking to get a job here, and I heard you guys know startups I could go work at, right? We got a thing just for you. It's the intro to the startup scene. Come to this next one, right? And for us, this is helping us to meet all the people that we want to know. So, like I said, our vision starts with Texas, and this is the Texas Manifesto. There's actually a long blog post that I wrote about a year ago that covers this at texasstartupmanifesto.com. But to summarize it, really the idea is that that if you're a startup here in Austin, and the same thing goes if you're in Dallas or Houston or somewhere else, that you're really not maximizing your opportunity if you think of it like my whole world is just my little one city. And I think traditionally, from my experience being here in Austin for the past 20 years, people think of Dallas like it's another country. Like, I never went to Dallas forever, and Dallas kind of like doesn't like Houston, and Houston doesn't like Dallas. And like, it's not. These cities have never collaborated at all, and it's been a little bit of a kind of a passive aggressive thing. And actually, there's a lot we can get together, and that's our pitch. And our thing is, if you're a startup here, we think you should be just treating it really like it's just one big city, like because you can go to any one of these other cities just for the day to go meet with people. For example, I'm going to Dallas tomorrow for the day. I'm going to send my kids off to school in the morning. I'm going to have dinner with them at night, and I'm going to have 6 hours worth of meetings in Dallas during the day. And then next Tuesday, we'll be there for the whole day. We're taking a whole bus up there for the day. And so we're doing this a lot ourselves to help to connect people, but it's something that I think any startup here should be doing. And the reason for that is while Austin is arguably like one of the best startup cities in the world and in the country, for new business creation, for funding, for activity, for all kinds, for talent, most importantly. It takes a bunch of different things to make a startup go, and money is one of those. And a lot of companies, especially you B2B ones, but even some of the B2C ones that need distribution, have to work with other big companies, existing Fortune 500 companies and others to go do that. And while Austin has the most startups and the most funding and probably the most tech talent, when you think about those other two components, that's actually not Austin. So Texas as a whole has more Fortune 500 companies headquartered here than any other state other than New York. But actually none of them are in Austin. We have big, like not headquarters, but second offices, right? Apple has their second largest headquarters here in Austin, but it's not their main one. And Apple and Facebook and Google and they all have big offices here, but it's not their headquarters. But oil companies, there's about 25 oil companies that are all based in Houston, and that's their actual headquarters. And then Dallas has about 25 other really big companies like American Airlines and Southwest and Toyota and AT&T and Capital One that are all headquartered up in Dallas. And so those are really big opportunities to get them kind of either as first customers or pilots or distribution or other things that they could do. And then also when we talk about funding, as much as Austin has the most funding of all the places in Texas, Texas as a whole gets about 2% of all the venture capital. And based on our economy and entrepreneurial activity, it really probably should be closer to 8 or 9%. Now, anywhere that's not Silicon Valley will have that same story of like, we don't get as much as we think we should. And it's probably true, but when they look at that, they're saying that, and they're looking at California thinking, oh, we need more money from California. And actually, there's a ton of money in Texas. It's just not money that traditionally goes into tech. It's oil and gas money, and it's real estate money. And it's not in Austin either. It's in Houston and in Dallas. And so again, part of what, if you're a startup here, you should, when you're fundraising, you shouldn't be thinking only of like who are the angel investors and the institutional investors here in Austin. You should be going all over the state looking for investors everywhere. And so that's what we're really trying to do. San Antonio is an important part of that too. San Antonio is the largest military base in the country. USAA is a Fortune 500 company that's based down there. It's also a major cybersecurity center. Houston, I mentioned oil and gas. It's also got the largest health healthcare center all in one place, the Texas Medical Center, so there's a ton of health there. Dallas is retail and fintech and esports and a whole bunch of other things. So there's all these different things happening around the state that you can tap into. And that, again, that's our whole thesis, is if you're a startup here, you should be leveraging this whole state and treating it like one big mega city. And that's what we're trying to do. So overall, Texas is the growth state. This is where all the talent's moving. This is GDP growth for last year, and it's just showing Texas way above everybody else. And the only thing that's even close to this is Idaho, and I promise you it's a lot harder for Texas to grow 5% than for Idaho to grow 5%, and no one else is anywhere near being close. And then this is a Kauffman Foundation report showing entrepreneurial activity, and Texas consistently ranked one of the top states for entrepreneurial activity. When you look within that, the 4 cities, Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, 4 of the top cities for entrepreneurial activity. And this is new business creation, startup density, really kind of the indicators of what's coming. And I said, talking about talent before, talent really drives this. This is a study that shows that Austin and Dallas are 2 of the best places for software engineers to get a job. Another reason why so many software engineers are moving here. And it works the other way too. If you're hiring software engineers, this is one of the best places for what it costs to do business here and what it costs to acquire and retain talent. And so that's a big reason why so many people are moving here, and the big companies are all moving here, and the startups are moving here because the talent's here, because the people are here. And I'll tell you, I never thought I'd see an article like this. This is only a few months old, but even, we had a big, very high-profile VC firm from California that's here today. And they're looking at how do they go fund companies outside of the valley, and they're thinking about moving their whole firm outside of the valley because the dynamics have changed. And I don't think like Silicon Valley's dead or anything, but it's not quite what it used to be. And there's more and more people looking at how they can go do things other places or complement what they do in the valley with a presence in other places. So Austin consistently ranked one of the best places to live. It's the 11th largest city, one of the fastest growing. We have all these great assets here like UT Austin, which is one of the largest universities in the country. It has the largest graduating computer science class in the country and also one of the top ranked computer science programs. New Dell Medical School driving a ton of health innovation here in Austin. South by Southwest just putting this big massive spotlight on everything once a year. Vista Equity, which is one of the top private equity firms in the world, funding software and tech companies. So just a lot of stuff going on here. Not the headquarters, but the second offices of Apple, Google, Microsoft, Dell, or Dell's headquarters, but Facebook, all these others, and then a really robust entrepreneurial ecosystem. And then you look at cities like Dallas, just another example. It's the 9th largest city in the country. UT Dallas is a really great university there, turning out a lot of tech talent, a lot of big companies that are based there, a lot of different focuses on different areas. a lot of private equity and family wealth, family offices, all the billionaires in Texas. They don't live in Austin. They live in Dallas, some in Houston, but like that's where those people are. And like I said, a lot of other big Fortune 500 companies. Houston, fourth largest city in the country. It's the most diverse city in the country and extremely international. So just lots of different things coming through there. I talked about the medical center, obviously oil and gas, rice being there. And then San Antonio, seventh largest city in the country. I've talked about a bunch of these different pieces already, but all these different components coming together is part of what makes us all together the 10th largest economy in the world, larger than Russia, and I think the number one state for startups. And so that's why we are just maniacally focused on Texas. Nobody else is even trying to do this. Nobody else is trying to own Texas. I don't know why, but we'll take it. We're gonna own Texas. When you think about Texas, when I moved here in 1999, this was a Dell town. Dell was like the big Austin success story. That was the startup that was big at the time. So I still think of that. And honestly, a lot of the startups here, you can trace it back to Dell, to people there, either how they got funded or the people that worked there or other things, because it really is an ecosystem that builds off of it. But some of the other really interesting companies here in Texas and certainly in Austin that should be on your radar, these are the success stories that we all want to kind of be more like. Indeed.com, we often don't get credit for it, but their headquarters is here and has been based here, and that's a huge company, one of those popular websites on the internet. Sparefoot.com, the first company that Capital Factory ever invested in, just raised a $150 million private equity round earlier this year. WP Engine, they just raised a $250 million round from Silver Lake earlier this year. They're totally killing it. They have over $100 million in revenue. Bumble, one of the latest unicorns here in Texas, and more on the consumer side. And then up in Dallas, Reward Style, which is a really interesting fashion tech e-commerce company. They make I Like to Know It on Instagram, and some other great products. And I think every indicator we have is that it's not getting worse; it's getting better. What do we see happening over the next 10 years? Are there going to be less people moving here, or more people moving here? There's going to be more people moving here. Are we going to have less companies moving here, or more? It looks like there's still a decent chance Amazon HQ2 or 2.5 or whatever you want to call it now ends up in either Austin or Dallas. Like, those are two very top contenders for being one of the two final locations. More connectivity internationally and people coming in here, more investment dollars flowing from around the state and from outside of Texas in here. And for our vision, it's just easier and easier to get around the state. There's more and more ways to move, and it's planes, it's buses, it's Fawn Lane, it's Megabus, it's a Hyperloop or something like that. There's a high-speed train being built from Dallas to Houston right now. It's going to really make them almost like one city. Like, you're going to be able to live in Houston and commute and like work in Dallas in a way that you never could have done before. I think a lot more coming, and that's why we're betting on Texas. So again, our thesis as a startup is you should treat it just like one big city. What city do you live in? I live in Texas. Like, I'm doing the whole thing. And we connect that together online through a platform called Union. So you all want to be on Union, but there's a lot of different ways to get on Union. We're one way to get on Union, but you want to have a Union profile for your company. That's how investors and other big companies and other things can find you, and that's how we connect the startups together across the state. And then in person, we do it here in Austin. We have 80,000 square feet in this building. We have 3 floors plus a new floor that we're building out right now. We just opened earlier this year about 25,000 square feet in Dallas, which is off to a great start. That's where I'm going to be tomorrow. So we're physically operating up there. And then, like we're doing next Tuesday, every month we're filling up a bus and pulling people from Austin to Dallas to Houston to San Antonio and getting people in the room together and helping them meet each other. And those things are really resulting in investments and talent moving and other things like that. So this is a great quote. This was Alexis Ohanian, who's the founder of Reddit. He was and Serena Williams' husband.
I like how in Texas y'all refer to yourselves as the 10th largest country in the world. And I think that's the absolutely right mindset, because with that much economic opportunity in one state, you really should be thinking about yourselves that way. And as far as I can see, Capital Factory is just going to run away with this in this state, which is great, because this is what it takes to get people to realize that money should be flowing here to support startups and entrepreneurs. It's cool to see. So I know I'll be making more trips.
So there's about 70 people on the team here at Capital Factory trying to help make all that happen. And I think one of the things that's really unique about our team and our culture is what we celebrate, what we honor is it's not about closing a big deal to make a lot of money, as much as we like to do that too. It's about connecting people together. And what our team's going to brag about is like, oh, I got this in person in front of that investor. oh, I got this startup to go meet with this really awesome mentor. Oh, we got this company to go apply for this, this pitch competition. They're going to get to be on stage. That's what our whole culture is all about. And so that's the Texas Manifesto. And so then we're going to jump to Q&A at the end. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna go through the fundraising tips and those lists, and then I'm going to bring Mike up here, and we'll be able to talk about any of those things that we just mentioned, or anything else you want to talk about as well. But before we go into the general Q&A, I think it's always good to ask the question of, should you raise venture capital at all? Like, is this a fit for me? Is it a fit for my business? Because I think a lot of people just hear the word startup and they think, great, I need to go do this path, and they see an example of what one other company did, and they think that's what I should go do. And venture capital is not for everybody or for every business. And so this is a pretty useful tool I've found for how to think about whether or not VC might be a good fit for you. And so the first thing is it really just asks these two main questions and bases it off that, which is, one is, how capital intensive is what you're trying to do? Like, how much money is it going to take? And then the second question is, how big of a business could it be? How scalable is it? And so capital intensive in this world, something that costs a few $1 million to get started is not very capital intensive. That's not a lot of money to start a company. Something that takes tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars to figure out, that would be capital intensive. Something that takes like tens of thousands of dollars is super cheap. That's awesome. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. And so generally, and then scalable is how big of a business it could be. And I would say generally when people are talking about a scalable business, they want something that could do more than $100 million a year in revenue. That would be a scalable business. That's something and that's the kind of business that could be worth $1 billion. And so those are two of the things that typically VCs are looking for. And so kind of simple ways to look at it, if your business is very capital intensive, it requires a lot of money to get it going and to figure out if it's going to work, and it's very, very scalable, then that is the classic fit for venture capital. Because first of all, there's almost no other way to do it, because you need tens of millions of dollars, and you usually can't get that without venture capital. And it's worth it, because it can be really big, so they'll give you tens of millions of dollars to go figure that out, right, over time, not just all at once, to figure that out. The other end of that spectrum is, if it's not very scalable, which still might be a great business, but maybe it's going to end up being a $10 or $20 million business total, and not very capital intensive. Like, you can build it yourself, because it's a program, it's software, and you can just go program it yourself on the weekends, or you can put your savings can go into making it and getting it going, and you can get it started yourself. Then that's a good fit for bootstrapping usually. For not raising any capital or not raising professional capital, because one, they probably aren't going to give you money because it can't be that big, so they can't get the returns they want, and two, you can do it. It's not that capital intensive, so you can go start it yourself, right? So those are the easy options. Actually, the third one's easy too, which is if it's not very scalable, it can't be that big, and it's very capital intensive, then it's probably just not a very good business, right? Let's go find something else. But the hard or more interesting question is this top left corner, which is, well, what if it's very scalable and not very capital intensive, which means it can produce the kind of returns that a venture capitalist would want, but maybe you don't have to go to a venture capitalist, because you could start it yourself, or you could go raise a bunch of money. So then you ask yourself a third question, which is, how hard is it for somebody to compete with me? What are the barriers to entry? If I go do this first, how hard is it for somebody else to copy me? And if it's really easy for somebody else to copy you, then that's probably a good reason to go raise money, because that's a reason why you want to move fast, is you want to be able to go dominate the market and keep other people from competing with you. But if you're in some niche that nobody else is even paying attention to or cares about, or for some reason, by you being the first mover or some technology advantage you have or something else you do, it's actually really hard for someone else to compete with you, well then, maybe you don't need to raise venture capital. That'd be another reason too. So those are just some helpful ways to think about it, but it's not for everybody. Raising venture capital is not success. Building the real business is success. And the first question to ask is just kind of like, is this for me? How does it apply? So hopefully that might be a helpful tool. And another really helpful concept, I think, as you think from a startup perspective, that I think a lot of first-time entrepreneurs don't really understand, is that from the investor's perspective, when they're looking at you, they're not just like looking at it in a vacuum, like, here it is, do you want it, yes or no? it's not a snapshot in time. And so it's not like you're gonna meet them and be like, hey, do you wanna invest in my company? Invest right now. It is a relationship kind of thing. And if you think about it, like they're giving you millions of dollars. Like they wanna get to know you. Like it's not crazy, right? Like, and so that happens over time. And this is a quote from, or was a blog post and a quote from a very well-known investor in LA named Mark Suster. And he said, I invest in lines, not dots. And what he means by that is that when he meets you, that's a point in time. That's a dot. He's got one data point. He knows where you are. But that doesn't really tell him where you're going, right? And what he really cares about, because he's betting on the future, is where you're going. And so ideally, he wants to meet you multiple times and have multiple data points. And with multiple data points, now you can plot a line through those and you get a sense of where you're going, right? So that's meeting you today and meeting you a month from now and meeting you a month after that. And that's why some of this takes time and a lot longer than a lot of people realize. But that concept's really important. And when you're doing that, what you're really asking investors to do is to believe you that you know what's gonna happen, right? You're telling them, here's my vision, here's what's gonna happen, and if they give me money, and I'm gonna give you back more money later, right? Here's how that's gonna happen. And to get them to believe you is really about making them believe that you're gonna do what you say you're gonna do. And while in a very simplistic way, one of the easiest ways to do that is to establish a track record and a history of doing what you say you're gonna do with the little things, right? So like all those little things of like, hey, it was great meeting you. I'm gonna send you an email, in 3 days with a follow-up. Like send the email in 3 days like you said you were going to, right? Hey, we have this meeting over the next couple weeks. I'm gonna focus on this, this, and this. And these are gonna be my priorities. I'm hoping to accomplish this. And then following up with them a few weeks later and saying, hey, remember when we met a few weeks ago? I said I was gonna do blank, blank, and blank. Well, here's what I did. I did blank, blank, and blank. Except for this part. I didn't do this because this came up and this changed. And here's what I learned. And just establishing that history, and if you do that over time, and they start to really see that you do all the things you say you're gonna do, then that's gonna go a long way towards making them believe when you say, well, and here's the business I'm gonna go build and what it's gonna be, that you're gonna go say what you're gonna do there too. So, that's not the end all be all, but I do think it's a really important thing, and it's something you can control and you can do that does really influence how people perceive you. We're not way over time, but that's probably be another about 10 minutes longer. Next thing is about what it takes to raise your seed round. And this I go into a lot more detail in that blog post that I mentioned, the 500K 2017, but it expands on these 5 points. I think pretty much every investor you talk to is gonna have their version of these 5 points. And they're all kind of maybe slightly different, but most of them are probably gonna have a lot of these core points on them, right? From what I found talking to a lot of them. And I think most investors you talk to are gonna say that the most important thing is the team. They're gonna say, we invest in people. It's all about the people, and the team's the most important part. So what's that really mean? It means, kind of like I was saying before, they gotta believe in you. They gotta believe that you're gonna do what you say you're gonna go do. And that usually takes something quite exceptional, because most of these things don't work, right? And so the easiest example of that is like, well, you've already done this before 3 times. Right? Like, well, that's pretty easy. Like, I've built 3 successful companies and they all went public, and I made a lot of money, and it was in the same space, and now I'm just doing that same thing again. Well, that's pretty easy to believe in. And then there's a huge variation going back from that, right? There's I've done something kind of like this. Now I'm in a different industry. I've done something but not this big before. There was a time, and it's not so much this way anymore, but 5 or 6 years ago, if it was like I worked at Google and I worked at Facebook, that was like a lot of credibility. That actually helped and counted as one of those things. And so you have to think, like, why are you the right person to go do this? Why are you going to be the one that succeeds? And some of that's track record. Sometimes it's just that, like, you were born to do this. And I meet people like that, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this person was born to do this. Like, this is what they're like, get out of their way. Like, this is what they're gonna go do. And that's what their whole background is. It's what all they think about. It's all they eat, breathe, and sleep. And like, that's what they're gonna go do. And that makes me wanna go believe in them. Sometimes it's that they have some personal story that really connects them to it, right? But just, there's gonna be some reason why you're the one to go do this, and that really matters. And one of the most important things about this point, and it being number 1 on the list as the most important thing, is of all the things on this list, that is actually the thing that you can affect the most. And most people think it is not the thing they can affect the most. They actually often think it is like the thing they can affect the least. But that is the easiest thing to change and to fix, is to add someone amazing to your team. And suddenly your whole prospects change. and like everything feels different, and suddenly something like was not fundable yesterday, and it's like somebody joined that team and the investors are like, I'm ready to fund it, I'm in. Or they bring to you some incredible new capability, right? Like they already have relationships with all the people you need to go sell to, or some like really deep experience or something, and it really makes a difference. And also, a lot of startups don't realize that they are able to go recruit great people to join their team. And they think of it like, I'm this crappy little startup, why would anybody like join my team or be part of what I do? And actually you can go get really incredible people to come join your startup, and that makes a huge difference. And you look, and usually like the classic example of this is like the best person to hire is the top salesperson at the huge company that you're trying to go kill, because they like know the space, have all the relationships, like can go help you get in the market and things like that. And you're thinking like, how could I ever hire that person, right? They work at this really big company that looks really successful. They probably make a lot of money. They, like whatever, right? But actually, there's a lot of reasons why you might be able to hire that person. Not necessarily all of these things, but like maybe that's a really crappy place to work, because honestly, most big companies are really crappy places to work. Maybe they got a really shitty boss and no growth path. Maybe they have nowhere to go, and they from that job, the person, or maybe it's the second best salesperson at that company, because the first salesperson is in the top spot, and they know they're not going to get that spot anytime soon. So their growth path is stumped at that company, and they got to go somewhere else. Maybe they just look at what you're doing, and if they really are the person that could make such a big difference, then they're going to see that. And they're going to realize it. They're going to go, oh my God, if I join that company, suddenly I make that company so much more valuable. Like I'm going to create all this value by coming, and they're going to see that as an exciting opportunity. So I just think it is one of the most important things. It's actually the thing that you can control the most, and it's one of the things I least see entrepreneurs realizing that they can affect. And I'd be really thinking about who are the best people in the world that could be part of my company, and how do I go get them, because that is what's going to really set you up for success. Some other quick things. So $1 billion growing market. This gets back to, is the business scalable? Different VCs and investors are going to define this different ways. And when you're dealing with angel investors or others, this could be slightly different, because they might not be looking for all the same kinds of return profiles. But professional investors that are looking for VC-like returns are typically looking for typically a 10x return. They have to believe that's possible in whatever they're investing in. And just for all the math on all these things to work, if you're talking about raising millions of dollars, it's kind of got to be in $1 billion. The rough idea of $1 billion market is that means if you're a 10% player in that market, you've got 100 million of it, which is enough to go build a big business and create a lot of value. Typically, when you're going to raise money from a professional investor, you're going to get outside money, and if you haven't done this a million times before, because that first one trumps everything else. If you've done this a million times before, you'll get money with nothing, like just with an idea, but that's pretty unusual these days, is you're going to have some kind of customer traction. You're going to have to show that like somebody wants this and somebody's willing to use it. And that's going to vary in different ways for different types of businesses. But just to give you a really rough rule of thumb, if you're doing a B2B business or a SaaS business, like we see a lot of SaaS B2B businesses, I'd say it's $1 million a year in revenue, or $100,000 a month in recurring revenue is what they're really looking for. If you have half that, but your business is super predictable, like you have like really clear metrics and growth, and you can show like, I'm halfway there, and watch, if I just sit here and don't do anything, I'm gonna get there. Like you can get credit for it in advance, like at half that. But that's really kind of what they're looking for. Again, it'll be different for different investors, but that's a good general rule of thumb, is that's showing like, look, we've got something working, somebody's really using it, there's some real demand, and it shows you can execute and get stuff done. Typically, there's some kind of early investor who believes in you, who's social proof. So there's different kinds of investors, and some investors are willing to be the ones to go first, and a lot aren't. And so having that idea, understanding that, and going to the ones who will go first is smart. And then the last thing on this list, because I do think you actually do not, it's the least important of all of these. Some of these others can trump it, but is having a working product. And interestingly enough, note that is below meaningful customer traction, because it actually is totally possible to get customers to pay you and have customer traction without having a product. And that's extremely impressive when you do that, but it does happen frequently. And so so you don't have to actually build a product, but usually you do. Most companies that I see going and raising a couple $1 million have a strong team with most of the people on it that they need. They're in a big enough market that makes this make sense. There are people using it and paying them. They've got a couple cool names on their thing of people that are involved, and something's really working. And so There's always exceptions, but like that's pretty good rule of thumb. Okay, last thing is Texas investors. I'm running a little behind, so I'm going to go through this quickly. But again, you got the slides. You can see all these. It's just a bunch of lists. And really what I'm trying to go through is just show you that there are a lot of options. There are a lot of different places you can go to attract VC funding. We're going to bring Mike up here. They're, I think, the largest fund in Texas, if not one of the largest funds in Texas, and certainly one of the most active investors, so you'll get to talk to him directly. But as I mentioned, a lot of reasons why people go to accelerators is because they don't already know 1 million investors. So they're going there to build their network. That's why you go to an accelerator, is because they're going to work with you, vet you, help polish up your pitch a little bit, and then introduce you to a bunch of investors. And so there's more to it than that, but that is probably the biggest reason why people go do it. There are a lot of accelerators here in Texas. A lot in Austin, but a lot all over the state. Most of them tend to focus on tech startups, but they actually focus on a lot of different things. There are some focused on consumer packaged goods, on esports, on health, so lots of different options. And different varying amounts of funding and other things that you can get along with that. There's also a number of nonprofit accelerators. They tend to be associated with universities. They tend to not have as much funding attached to them, or their grants or other things like that, but also great ways to get more resources for what you're doing. These tend to happen typically before the commercial ones. There's also a bunch of angel networks in Texas, and CTAN, which is the Austin one, the Central Texas Angel Network, and HAN, the Houston Angel Network, are consistently ranked as two of the largest and most active angel groups in the country. So they are investing in a lot of companies, and all of these groups syndicate. So if like CTAN does it, they'll actually go share it with all the other angel groups, and a lot of them will pile onto it too. Angel networks are a great way to raise funding. It's a slower process than most of these other processes. It's not usually people's first choice. It's not that it's bad, but if you can go get Mike to go give you a couple $1 million, do that. Most people would go do that instead. But again, it's just different types of businesses. These will also invest in some businesses that maybe wouldn't fit the criteria for one of those VC investments that we talked about on the chart before. And then tech seed, seed, Series A, these terms are not really well defined. So some people will say, we raised our Series A, and I might look at that and be like, you just raised your seed round. But generally, I'm going to call seed the first professional money you're getting. The first money that's not from friends and family, not from angel investors, but from somebody whose job is to invest money. And typically you're getting, $500,000 to a couple $1 million, like I was talking about before. And there are a lot of options for that in Texas, a lot in Austin. Most of them focused on tech. A lot of them have some other focuses. A lot of companies that will do seed investments will also do Series A investments, or it's more the opposite. Ones that will do Series A will also kind of like make earlier investments that are seed investments. But that's a good list. See one on there that's already dead. This stuff's changing all the time. I got to take off. And here's more of them. Mark Cuban's a really active investor in Texas. He's based up in Dallas, and just a couple others on here as well. True Wealth Ventures, really great group that's focused on investing in female entrepreneurs that have social impact, and others that you'll see as well. Series A, so these are just going to tend to be larger checks, larger funds, again, similar kind of distribution. Most of them in Austin, most of them focused on tech, but a bit of a range. And then we have a lot of people raising new funds. Probably some of these new funds I should probably move to regular funds. So a lot of these have already been raised. But a lot of people raising new funds across the state, again, with all kinds of different focuses. And then when you think about VCs, I wouldn't just think about the VCs that are here. Of course, they are the best ones. But there's VCs from all over the world that are coming to Austin looking for deals. And like I said, we have one happening visiting from Silicon Valley here today. And so when you think about VCs, when you're kind of doing your research of like which VCs should I talk to, part of it's like which ones invest in my space and my kind of company, my stage, things like that. But another really good one is just like who's already got an investment in Austin. Like they're already coming here on a regular basis. So it's easy for them to make another investment here, because believe it or not, that is how VCs think, and that is a major factor in it. So these people are already all coming here on a regular basis on a plane to go meet with some other company, and so it's much more likely to get them to make a second investment here. It's much easier to get someone to make a second investment in Austin than to get them to make their first investment in Austin. And then it's not our focus. My focus tends to be mostly on software and tech, but there are a lot of other, or more and more other types of investment groups coming into town as well. So that's about it for the talk part of it. I'm going to have Mike come up in just a sec, but some other resources on fundraising in general if you wanted to go do some reading. 2 of these by Austin people, actually. You might have heard of Lean Startup. That's a great tool if you're not sure where to start, how to validate your business idea. Ash Myra is an Austinite who's also a globally recognized leader in Lean Startup. He wrote an awesome book that I really like called Running Lean. Get Backed is also by 2 Austinites, Evan Bear and Evan Loomis. This is the book about how to make your pitch deck and like how to go do the process of going and pitching VCs. And it's real. They're super smart. They're both really great entrepreneurs, and it's really well done. And then probably kind of just like the Bible of all of venture capital is this book called Venture Deals. It's written by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelson. Brad's one of the founders of Techstars, really great investor, really prolific. Has written a bunch of books, lots of blog posts, things like that. But this is kind of like the book everybody looks back to help me like understand how does venture capital work. So thanks for listening through that. With that, we'd love to invite Mike to come on up. And we're going to jump into the Q&A part. So we'll open this up to all of you. Yeah, thanks for coming. And I'm going to let Mike introduce himself briefly first. And then we'll open up to Q&A, and we're happy to talk about anything. So, obviously the focus of this is fundraising, but if you wanted to ask us about any of those things that I just talked about today, or a question about your startup, or anything like that, we're happy to do that. So Mike, you want to maybe give yourself a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks for the big picture of my mug up on the screen. Mike Marcantonio, as Josh mentioned, I'm with Live Oak Venture Partners here in town. We're an Austin-based VC. We only invest in Texas-based businesses, so most of you here, I assume, are based in Texas. The firm was started back in 2012 by 3 partners that were working together at Austin Ventures, and as AV started to unwind, they launched a $100 million fund and primarily focused on Series A, although we will occasionally do seed, which is pretty common, as Josh mentioned. So we like to be the first institutional money. If you go out and do a friends and family round, raise some angel money, even a small seed fund, that's great, but we generally like to be the first venture capital firm investing, and that's $1.5 million to $3 million initially if you're at the Series A stage. If you're a little bit earlier, we may invest $500,000 to $1 million, maybe a little bit more, but we'll invest in all things tech. So Texas-based with technology-focused businesses. The one thing we won't do is healthcare businesses that have FDA requirements. So no blood, no life sciences, no biotech. My background, I moved to Austin about 6 months ago, actually, from Virginia, East Coast guy, born and raised, but married a Texan, and so she pulled me here. Excited to be in Austin, a much bigger, more vibrant ecosystem than where I was coming from, but have been doing venture investing for about the last 7 years. So a little bit about me and the firm.
Awesome, that was perfect. So when you signed up for this, there was a place where you could ask a question. And we're not just gonna answer all these questions, but I put them up here mostly just as to remind you and inspire you. So if you want to ask us any of these questions, you can, and we can see them, or you can ask anything else you want. So that would love to open it up to all of you. Who's got the first question?
Hey Josh, so how do you guys handle competing businesses in your startup portfolio? So maybe one of us have a business that we really like to have Capital Factory look at, but when we look deep in the list, they're already mentoring or doing somebody who's very similar.
So that's probably more of a Capital Factory specific question. They don't have as much of an issue with that because they're a much smaller portfolio, but we work with hundreds of companies, both companies that work here, companies that are part of our accelerator, companies that we invest in. And so one, we have to be aware of that can happen, that we could invest in, and we have companies that, especially when you read their one sentence description, sound like they're really similar, right? And the other thing to realize, especially that could happen to Live Oak as well, but is more likely to happen to us with so many companies, is even if we tried really hard to make sure that nobody was working on the same thing, after we invest in them, they would pivot into doing the same thing. You know what I mean? They would then decide to go compete with each other, and we can't tell them well, you can't do that, we can't tell them what to do. So it would happen anyway, right? But for us, it actually doesn't turn out to be much of an issue. It's just really the way that we engage and how we help. First of all, we got hundreds of mentors. It's not like everybody talks to everybody, right? And so there is a kind of a code of conduct of obviously respecting everybody's confidentiality and disclosing things that you're doing. If you're working really closely with one startup, you probably wouldn't be appropriate for you to be working really closely with the one that's directly competing with them unless both of them knew that and we're all okay with it, right?
Right.
but in practice, that very rare, it's just not an issue like that. It doesn't come up. And then as far as how we handle it, we have to be a little bit careful about compartmentalizing confidential information. Obviously, we're getting back financials and reports like that, and we don't share those or anything like that with anybody. But in a little bit different way of how we help, like being part of Capital Factory is about plugging you in all the stuff that's happening here. And so like, if somebody shows up and they say, I'm really interested in, healthcare companies that are doing stuff with VR and mental health or something, I'm just making up some example, and say we have 2 companies doing that, like we would just introduce them to both of the companies. Like we just, it's not, we wouldn't pick one of them to go do it with. We would just kind of like introduce them to both of them, and it's up to them to like earn their way up, right? And that's kind of our general approach. Is it just doesn't end up being much of an issue because we can often help both of them. And what we find is that companies that think they are competitive usually aren't nearly as competitive as they think. You take 2 entrepreneurs with the same idea and the same business at the same time, and they will go do different things. And they will end up going after different customer segments and different markets and evolving in different ways. Cool. So anyway, it's a totally reasonable question, and that's certainly not the first time it's been asked, but we've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and it has, I think like once somebody had a concern about it. I don't believe it was actually an issue or a problem, but like, in one of thousands of companies, like it just doesn't really come up much.
That's great.
So totally reasonable question, but it doesn't turn out to be much of an issue.
Thank you.
I got a question. I saw the Geekdom Fund. What is that?
So Geekdom is a co-working space community in some ways a lot like Capital Factory, and then of course in its own ways different too, in San Antonio. And it's actually a completely separate company and ownership and everything else, but sharing that name, they have an investment fund called the Geekdom Fund in San Antonio. They invest in all kinds of companies all over the place, but particularly across Texas. They're great investors. We invest in a lot of deals with them. They tend to be, there's not a large of a fund as Live Oak, so they when we said sometimes we'll let seed people go in first, like they'd probably count more like one of those seed investors where they might put in a couple $100,000 early or something.
What
like
do
that.
they? Because like I know that y'all are mentioning a lot of media tech and stuff like that. My question is like, have y'all ever fundraised or helped invest in like non-media tech? Like, I mean, give you an example. I know that the Austin Chronicle was invested by South by Southwest. That's not a tech company.
Actually,
It is?
Austin Chronicle created South by
Okay,
Southwest. It's the opposite way, but
Right.
there were no investors involved.
There were no.
That's a bootstrapped business. They just launched it.
Bootstrap?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But no, the answer to your question is no. Our focus for us is on tech, and to be honest, a lot of this whole mechanics of like how this works, most of it applies primarily to tech businesses. It gets back to the scalability thing and the capital intensive parts. So most businesses that are very scalable are also very capital intensive in a different way. And then a lot of businesses that aren't tech aren't scalable. One of the great tech makes things scalable. That's like one of the key attributes of it is it's really scalable. So you just often end up having to raise money for those businesses different ways.
Yeah. If you have a business that's like that, and let's use a newspaper example. If you want to launch a new newspaper and it's not digital, it's just traditional, throw it on your front porch every morning. You probably need to go raise money from somebody who has an affinity for the newspaper business. So
But if it is digital, then that would be considered tech?
yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
okay.
And I think it gets broader and broader every day, right? There's
Yeah,
more and more things we'd invest in today that we wouldn't have invested in 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's a
That are
couple.
tech now and they weren't then, right?
There's a couple digital newspapers that have raised a lot of money recently. The Athletic is a sports-focused one that just raised $40 million. Axios is kind of everything that's raised a ton of money. So there's
Daily Dot is one here in
Yeah.
town that's, I don't know, being super successful, but
Yeah.
it's like another example like that. So,
Yep.
cool.
So do you currently have a fund, and if so, how far are you into it?
Yeah, so we had Fund 1 back in 2012. We finished investing in that basically the end of last year, and we're now investing out of Fund 2, which looks and feels exactly like Fund 1. So another 100 million-ish. It's going to be probably 15 to 18 investments. We'll make those investments over the next 4 years. And then the fund life, for those of you who aren't familiar with the venture capital fund structure, it's generally a 10-year life. So our investors who invest in us, which are pension funds, the University of Texas endowment, things like that, their money's tied up for 10 years. We invested over the first 4, and then over the next 6 years, we start to exit and sell off those companies as they've grown and matured. So we've done 3 deals, closing the 3rd hopefully soon, out of Fund 2. So plenty of quote, dry powder to invest over the next
All
few
really
years.
good ones, actually.
We think so.
All
and
ones-
I
all
think
ones we're
we're
co-investors.
probably co-investors.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So.
When you're doing due diligence for your companies, a lot of times, at least for me, what's a problem is regulatory, federal government, stuff like that. I've got to comply. I don't have the cash to figure out or pay, a legal team to get me there
Yep.
because it's expensive. Do you have any advice for anyone doing seed stuff?
Yeah, I'll start, and Josh probably has some good advice as well. So for traditional legal, fortunately in town, there are a number of good firms that focus on early stage companies and are willing to work with you with very reasonable fee structures, or kind of on the promise that if you grow, they will grow with you and you'll make it up to them later on. And that's an informal contract structure, nothing in writing there, but they want to be with you as you grow. As it relates to regulatory, that does get really expensive because you're working with specialists and oftentimes they're outside of the city. One way to tackle that is through advisors and mentors that have expertise in that area. Oftentimes those folks will do things pro bono or perhaps in exchange for a small amount of equity, but they're doing it because they enjoy giving back and they have a level of expertise that they know is very specialized. I don't know if you have other...
Yeah, I think it kind of also gets back to when you talk about newspapers and you said, like, find people that really know that. I mean, I think, with that type of thing, there are going to be certain types of investors. There'll be a lot of investors that what you just said will totally freak them out, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with anything that requires any kinds of, approvals or things like that. And then just like with anything, there's going to be other investors who look at that and be like, no, that's my sweet spot. And so there's a firm here in town that was recently launched. I don't know much about them. They're called Trust Ventures, and their focus is on businesses that are disrupting regulated industries. So I don't know if that's what you're doing, but those tend to have those kinds of things, right? Where they know we're going to get into stuff, and there's going to be a bunch of rules and regulations, other things about it, and maybe what they're doing to start with might be illegal.
Would Uber be considered a business like that?
Oh yeah, for sure, totally. And their thought is thinking, hey, we think, and just using Mike as a generic example here, but those guys are going to be afraid of this business, or not comfortable with it, and that's why it's our opportunity, right? Is we understand that, we know it. So who are the people that are going to get that and understand it? And they're going to be more likely to either give you that funding, or like Mike said, maybe connect you with resources or things that can help you get there without it. And one thing about being an entrepreneur that that I think is so key, and this gets back to bootstrapping, which to me is more of a mentality than necessarily like a absolute black or white kind of thing. But being an entrepreneur is about being resourceful. It's about because really none of this should have ever happened. It's super hard to start a company and to make something out of nothing, and that's why so many people fail at it, and why so many people try to do it and can't, is because it's really hard. And so to do that, you really have to be resourceful. You have to find things that other people didn't see, and you have to find ways to get things done for free or for much cheaper or in a different way than what it looks like you have to go do, right? And so, like an example, when we wanted to open this space, Capital Factory, on this floor, nobody would have leased me this floor. I wasn't an it's what it costs. To lease a 20,000 square foot floor in a big building like this, they won't lease it to you unless they know you're gonna pay the rent. You got to be a big company, all this other stuff. And I ended up working a deal where a friend of mine had leased this out for his floor, for his company, and his company had changed direction, and he sublet it to me. So I just had to convince my friend, not the REIT that owns this building, right? And otherwise we never would have been able to get a floor, right? How did we get the next floor? The building sold. And the old owner had leased the floor to himself. So the new owners wanted him out of there, and we had some credibility from just having brought the president here, and we were able to move that. How did we get the ground floor? Building sold again. Last commission for all the salespeople. I'm serious. Everyone's a magic trick, and we never should have any of this space. And to me, that's being an entrepreneur. It's figuring out some way to do it that on paper this never should have happened.
Thanks for that.
I couldn't agree with you more about the entrepreneurial part. I actually even kind of find it interesting that you can go to school to learn how to be an entrepreneur, which is kind of a funny term to me. But having said that, I'm surprised that you are actually in the seed business. That's new to me. It's something I just learned. So how does that process actually happen? Do I pick up the phone and say, hey Mike, can I come by and give you
How does somebody meet Live Oak? And this is different for different firms, and I've heard you and your
yeah.
partners talk about this.
Yeah, and it's probably different by partner to partner within the firm. So I'm new to town, right? I've been here 6 months. You're going to see me at a lot more events around town than probably some of our senior partners, where they're getting inbound phone calls from their friends around town with new deals. They know a lot more entrepreneurs because they've been in this ecosystem longer. So going to events like this, going to other industry-related events, depending what industry your business is in, you're going to find investors around town that are hanging out there. The hardest way is the cold email or the submission through the website, but I will say at Live Oak, we look at every deal that comes through the plan submission button on our website, and the fastest growing and probably the largest company in our portfolio right now came through the website. So you can do that. It's great. You know, we're happy to get leads all day long and take a look at business plans. The quote best way is to find an entrepreneur that we know that's either on a management team of one of our companies or that someone on the team has invested in the past, and to get a warm introduction. But really, at the end of the day, our job is to take meetings and meet as many companies as we can, and then take that huge funnel and narrow it down to 15 to 18 companies. So it's not going to be too hard to get our attention, but it's a lot of first meetings, and then from there, usually we have to cut it down pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, and just to reiterate one of those points, from my experience with any VC, the best intro is from the CEO of one of their most successful companies. It's not a lawyer, it's not another investor, that is the best intro you can get. That's the person they respect the most, that's the person they want to go invest in again, and that's your best possible entry, is to find the CEO or executive at one of the companies that is doing really well, that they really like, and have them say to them, I really think you should go talk to this entrepreneur, I really like what they're doing.
Yeah, and
That is the best possible intro.
plug for Josh and Capital Factory. We're here at least once a month, if not twice a month, doing office hours, meeting companies that are here. He and his team send us interesting businesses that fit our profile. So being associated with some of those accelerators, centers of influence in town, will get you introduced to investors.
Like we have somebody on our team who does investor relations. Part of his job is to know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So that when he sends them an email, they're like, okay, like Nick knows what we're looking, this is probably super real. We should take a look at it, right? But it's still better to get one from one of their CEOs. What?
How do you feel about like Kickstarter or GoFundMe? What do you feel about that?
It's funny, I had a meeting this morning with someone and we talked about that. I don't have anything against them. Companies that, if you have I think they're more suited for product companies, meaning like CPG type businesses. And it's a great way to get some capital and go build your first product or couple products and test things out and get feedback from the market. It can get tricky if you have a very successful Kickstarter campaign and you want to raise venture capital down the road, because you may have a very long cap table, or there may be some terms associated with it that make it more difficult for a venture investor down the road. So it gets back to Josh's graph on scalability and capital intensiveness. It's right for certain businesses, but the way I view it, it's generally right for smaller, more product oriented, and maybe not necessarily going down the venture capital path. I don't know if you disagree.
Well, I think that's a great point. The first thing I think a lot of people get confused about this. I would really separate equity crowdfunding from customer funding or customer kick. What the examples you gave were not equity crowdfunding; they were Kickstarter, which is really just people paying for things in advance, which is fucking awesome. Like, do that all day long, right? That's great. And on this slide about what it takes, that is meaningful customer traction. Remember I said you can get people to customer traction without a minimum viable product? Kickstarter is how you do that. That's one of those ways, right? Look, I have all these people that want my thing so much, they paid for it already, and I haven't even built it yet. That's compelling. That says a lot. Not for every business, but that's a great thing to go do. Before Kickstarter, it was almost impossible to get hardware businesses or CPG businesses funded. And a lot of them that VCs wouldn't look at or wouldn't just take the risk on, that once you prove, no, there is a market for it, I've got people using it, then you can start to get some VCs and other people involved. So I think it's great, and particularly I like the customer side of just getting people to pay in advance. That is awesome, do that all day long if it fits for your business, if you can do it. It is something it's a skill. There are people that are good at Kickstarter. At this point, if you want to do a Kickstarter, you hire someone to run a Kickstarter campaign for you. You don't just go figure it out yourself. And then On the equity crowdfunding side, I think that I'm a lot more skeptical of. I think some of the things Mike was hinting at, like it's good for different types of businesses. If you plan on raising venture capital, I would not do equity crowdfunding at all. It complicates things a lot, and it's going to make it messy. And quite frankly, there's different types of businesses, and there's some that is perfect for. But if a business is a venture track business and they do equity crowdfunding, that usually says they weren't able to raise venture capital. That's like that's what it signals out.
Would you speak to how much a patent portfolio would affect success of a fund?
What's
Of a
success
company?
of a startup?
Obtaining a startup.
What's
Yeah.
the question?
Or obtaining funding? How much do patents matter and whether or not you get funded?
Yeah.
Is that good way to say it?
Some investors put more weight on it than others, particularly in the area where we don't invest, biotech and life sciences. I think if you have a enterprise software business, a SaaS business model, for example, we're probably not going to put a ton of weight on patents because there's often easy ways, or just somebody can recreate that wheel with a slight tweak and get around your patent. And so we're gonna be focused more on what's the unique value proposition that this product is bringing, what's the problem it's solving, and less concerned with a patent portfolio. I think there's certain instances where it can be very valuable, but generally not where we're spending our time. So if you do it, it's not a waste of money. If the company 5 years from now doesn't scale, but you are left with a patent that has some value, you could get a couple $1 million by selling it to a large corporation that maybe can do something with it. But
I'd say most again, totally agree with what he said. Like, it's good, it's not bad. It's gravy, it's not meat. No one's gonna invest in your company because you have the patent. That is not gonna be the reason that makes the difference. Like, it's a positive, not a negative, but it just doesn't matter that much for most businesses. And most businesses that we're seeing, first of all, the whole business will probably be obsolete by the time the patent gets issued. Like, whatever it is you just patented, you'll be doing it completely differently 5 years from now. Most of the companies we see here. Now, there are some that really matters, but just most of them, it's just not going to matter. And to be honest, I mean, not getting into more personal opinion, my personal opinion on software patents, most of these just are patents that shouldn't have been issued anyway. Like, if what you did is something you thought up in a weekend, like, it probably shouldn't be patented. Patents are for things that require tons of research and investment and take lots of time, and that's why you're protecting them, right? And just with the Army here, we're starting to see more of those things and more stuff coming out of UT and stuff like that, but that's actually not the most common thing we see here. The most common thing we see here is actually something somebody made up over the weekend. And that's okay, like, those can become really big businesses. Facebook is something somebody made up over the weekend, but it's just to me, the patent is not like the thing there. And just even more intellectually, I just don't even think it just doesn't make sense. Like, that's not what what patents are for.
When you actually get to the point where investors create kind of write you a check, how do you ensure that you're not giving up too much equity and actually getting a fair valuation? I mean, it's probably a complicated answer, but I guess whatever you can provide that would be interesting.
yeah, I guess there's two ways to look at it, or two parts to the question. It's a personal question in the sense of how much of your business are you willing to give up, and you have to answer that question after hopefully you've tested the market and the market's told you what your business is worth. So there are some rules of thumb, and I'm happy to walk through them as far as rough valuation ranges at different company stages. So in Austin or Texas broadly, this is a little bit different than the coast. Seed rounds, meaning you do have some customer traction, you've got a product that's out there in the market, so you've got, call it $250K to $1 million of annual revenue. Those seed rounds are going to get done if it's a note with a cap on the note in the $4 or $5 million range. If it's a priced round, the pre-money is probably then 4-ish or 5-ish, and post-money is a little bit more than that. As you grow and you go out and raise maybe a $5 to $7 million Series A round, those valuations could be anywhere from $8 million pre-money to mid-teens or even north of 20, depending on how fast you're growing, how big the market is, how strong the team is. So the math to do there is if I'm raising $5 million and it's $10 million pre-money, $15 million post-money, I've given up a third of my business, 5 divided by 15. But again, it comes down to your personal situation and whether you're comfortable giving up that amount of your business. If you're not, there's nothing wrong with that. You can bootstrap. You may be very successful and maintain a lot more of your business. The typical VC spiel is: do you want 80% of 20 million or 20% of 80 million, or big number? But it's really a personal question at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first things I'd think about is just working to make me feel better about that. So obviously, if you're asking that question, then you're like, well, hey, I'm not an expert at this. I haven't done this a million times, which is okay. Most people haven't, right? And so then the things that are going to give me comfort would be, one, working with a reputable firm, like someone that is like, does a lot of deals, like, and has a reputation in the ecosystem, in the community. Like in my book being a great example of that. Like, there's 3 or 4 of them that are the most active firms in town. They're doing lots of deals, and just that would actually give me some comfort. They've got a good reputation. They're working with lots of people. I would expect what they're giving me is somewhat standard. At the stage that we're talking about, like this really early stage, to be honest, it's actually really easy because it's so standardized, because none of you are worth $4 million or $5 million anyway. Like, no offense, but like you have to start somewhere. And so if you tried to explain why you're actually worth $4 million, you probably couldn't. Like, and so you have to just arbitrarily start somewhere, and that's kind of where it starts. And so that's why these things all kind of go that way. And so also, again, it's kind of standardized. If you're asking that question, that's why you want to have some good advisors or mentors around. That's a great reason to be part of an accelerator, is because you can go, not just ask the mentors and the advisors, you can ask the other startups, right? You can just ask peers of yours. Like, you can get a feel for what's going on. The one thing I would just add onto that is just simple is good with funding and financing. And anytime like it starts to feel creative, like, look, we have this plan, like, that's usually bad and weird. And you just want to you want to be creative with your marketing. You want to be creative with your product. You want to be creative with your culture. You want to be totally boring with how you fund your company. Like, that is not the place to be creative. Maybe if it's your 10th company, like, you can start to get creative. Most of the time, it's like, keep it super simple and boring. There's a reason everybody's done it this way. It's really hard to predict all the things you can't expect or don't know are going to happen. And that's why these things are done that way, is because they're thinking about all those other things. There's a lot of unintended consequences when you get creative.
Yeah, and beyond valuation, deal terms. If you're doing a convertible note, which is much more common these days in the earliest stages, there's several resources online that are very standardized, and venture firms across the country are comfortable using those. I'd start there. If you're getting into a priced equity round, make sure you're using a reputable law firm in town. It's worth the money you're going to spend. They're going to be able to tell you if the VC's playing games with any terms in there. They'll probably also have a sense for valuation and whether it's fair. At the end of the day, you may have to take some terms that are not necessarily entrepreneurial friendly if there's not as much interest, but vice versa. In the hot deals, we have to take very entrepreneurial friendly terms. So
the only negotiating leverage you have is having 2 offers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. That's the only leverage you have. So if you only have, if you're talking, I mean, this is not exactly. Now I'm helping you negotiate against Mike, but like, I mean, if you're just talking to him, like, he gets to tell you what their deal is. Sure. And usually you need it more. Like, he can go invest in other deals. Like, you need the money. Like, so you're gonna have to take whatever he tells you the deal is. If you got 2 offers, now you can say, well, Mike, I got this other offer.
Yep.
Like, if you can do this for me, like, like, you can start to negotiate. And so that's your best asset, is having multiple offers, and that starts to tell you what the market is too, like what's fair, because you can do that.
So I got really close to going to Cardo.com and paying for a 409A valuation. Would you guys recommend doing something like that? No. Okay.
No.
Well, there was a larger sentence. So, one, I would totally recommend Carta.
Okay.
Carta's awesome.
Yeah,
like, I mean,
cap table
you
management.
want everyone to
It's
use
great.
Carta,
Yeah,
right?
Carta's
I mean,
absolutely very
yes,
easy.
use Carta. Carta is great. We love it if you use Carta. That makes your life easier. It makes our life easier. All VCs love Carta, as in general. In general, if you need a 409A valuation, Carta is a great way to get it.
Yes.
It's very cost effective, and yes, I would get one from them. Now, I think the question Mike was answering that we thought you were asking was, if I'm just getting started, should I get a 409A valuation now? And that, I think the answer is no. That's
It's
a waste
not
of money.
a,
Is that fair?
it's not a great
Like,
indicator of what a
Yeah.
VC is going to value your next
Yeah.
round at. It's great. You're going to have to get them when you issue stock options. Carta is amazing.
That's why to do it. Is that
Yeah.
I'm issuing stock options, so I need a 409A valuation. And Carta is a cheap, easy way to go.
Yeah, they used to be $15K for 409A. Now it's like $3,000 or maybe even less.
$17.50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's amazing. So
So we love Carta.
No.
We make all of our startups. The first thing we do is Carta.com.
like Magna Carta. Yeah.
First thing we do is make everybody use Carta when they come here. I mean, like make for their own good, like, but like for everybody.
Thank you.
Sir.
So you were saying that if you're worth, 4 or 5 million, it's, is it kind of discounting the business as a whole? So if we're maybe not worth 4 or 5 million, but we're generating millions in revenue, does that kind of set us out of the possibilities of getting venture capital?
No, that just makes you more real. We're we're talking about things. Most things we're talking about don't have millions of revenue, so they're not really worth a couple $1 million.
Yeah, I think Josh's point was 4 or 5 million is probably inflated for most businesses that have 0 or very little revenue.
Okay.
If you have several million, your valuation more than likely is going to be more than that, and that's where you can start to get into more of a mathematical valuation versus very early stages. It's those 5 factors, and 4 to 5 million happens to be where the market sets deals for those businesses today.
Does it hurt, or I guess I haven't done any sort of funding research, so I'm
Sure.
very late.
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
This is okay.
Yeah.
This is what it's for.
So if your entire company is several processes, or you've developed several pieces of technology that are more known for.
Would it help you if you were specific? Can you like give us an example? Like,
Yeah, so manufacturing or robotics
Mhm.
and augmented reality.
2 different business lines, you mean?
Well, we developed robotics and AR, but we also developed AI. So we're.
Those are 3. None of those buzzwords really work right now. I'm just kidding. That was really.
So yeah, we're using
Robotics,
them all.
AI, AR. No one's gonna like this. No. It's terrible.
It's super boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're bringing that and other inventions together, generating revenue. So we have a kind of a very different type of business.
It just sounds like you have a real business.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
You just get to have a more interesting conversation because now you can actually like think. You probably want to talk to other people. You can think like, well, how do we value this? So like here's what we got. There's
Yeah.
like when he said there's a math equation. Like now you can actually go like, okay, well, companies your size are worth a multiple of revenue or a multiple of profit. You can. The problem with when someone's starting from scratch is like there's a multiple of nothing. Like it's just, and they often have a little bit of IP or something.
So that, just for what it's worth, the questions that start going through my head when you were given the brief overview there are, well, okay, who are your customers? Are you selling to government type agencies, and those would be very large contracts but take a very long time to win? Or are you selling to ABB of the world, robotics companies where you may already have relationships there or you've already sold to them? And as you answer those questions, I'll have a better sense for how quickly you'll be able to scale, how difficult, how painful the sales cycle is, and all that plays into valuation, right? But the fact that you have real customers and real revenue, both great check marks and obviously interesting technology, it sounds like. So.
Yeah.
So I've heard you say before Austin's known for a 2-term sheet town. Do you still see it that way? I mean, 1-term sheet town. Do you see us moving to more of a 2-term sheet competitive market, or is it still?
I like that way of saying it. I hadn't said it exactly that way. We're a 1-term sheet town because it's probably mostly true. Yeah, I mean, most companies that I see getting funded only have 1-term sheet.
Yeah,
I'm not like all of them. Like there's definitely the best ones are gonna have options, but like, and it doesn't mean the other ones are bad. It's just that's just the nature of it. I think most of them, it's still a relationship thing. There's like 4 or 5 really active firms in town, maybe like of Live Oak size, and there's a bunch of other smaller ones. Like they're gonna do how many deals does we do this year?
4 or 5 probably.
4 or 5. Others might do 1 or 2 a year, right, or something like that. And so that makes them a really active firm, and like.
I think, sorry to cut you off there. A common dynamic that I've seen is that in the seed stage deals, Live Oak and the other names on the list, we'll see most of those, but because that's a smaller fraction of our portfolio, it's a lot easier for the different firms to pass. And so to get one term sheet from an Austin firm is great. A Series A round, there's probably a higher likelihood of 2 term sheets, or that I'm going to spend more time with it, and Roger at Silverton's going to spend more time with it. And whether we get there and submit a term sheet, there's at least those competitive dynamics early on,
Right.
Getting there.
But in the end, with only 4 or 5 to pick from, they all still need to fall in love with you.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like, and just the chances are that you fall in love with everybody, like, aren't that high, right? And so when there's 20 firms, there's probably a lot more likelihood of you getting
Yep.
a couple matches versus one. Because it just, again, it really is this is a personal thing. These people have to believe in you. It's one of the biggest challenges in diversity in venture capital, right? Is that it's a totally reasonable and logical thing to think that you're only going to give millions of dollars to somebody that you know well and have experience with and can relate to, and on one level that's like a really reasonable assumption, right? Like, but if you think about it inherently, that means you're going to all talk to people that you know that are like you, that right? And then from that at another level isn't a very good investment strategy, right? And so that's one of the biggest barriers to all this is this is an insider's club. Like the kind of ways you get someone to make a big bet and give you millions of dollars is it's a relationship thing. And then again, hopefully that's part of why having places like this where anybody can show up today and meet Mike and talk to him, right? And opens those doors. And that's why it's great that they come do this, right? That that's one of the ways they get to meet lots of different people, or the fact that, because not everybody does this, that they respond to every cold inquiry they get on their website is part of how one way they deal with that, right?
Yeah, I'd say in town, the firms in town, submitting a term sheet is essentially saying, I want to get this deal done. In the Bay, in New York, because it's even more competitive, you'll have firms that'll submit term sheets really quickly and then do the bulk of their diligence afterwards, which puts you as an entrepreneur at risk if they walk away. But here in town, generally, if we submit a term sheet, we've done the bulk of our work and we're ready to get done. So we don't submit that many, and that's why the competitive dynamics aren't quite the same.
Yeah. Probably time for 1 or 2 more questions.
A little kind of an extension of what you guys were just talking about. Have you ever said anything either one of you, said anything along the lines of, damn, I love your idea, but your team is weak, we'll do it if you hire this guy? Have you ever brought a guy to the deal, either one of you?
I've definitely seen that happen.
We probably would say it a little differently, but look, as geographically focused investors and having 20 years of experience collectively in Austin, there's a lot of talented folks we know around town. So it's very common, sit down in a meeting, at the end of the meeting, politely point out a hole in the team or someone that could be very valuable and make that introduction so they can go get coffee a week later. Oftentimes we're going through our head and saying, well, here's who we have in our portfolio companies today that may be looking for something different, or we've just sold a business and those folks are now ready for their next gig, and we want to help introduce you to talented folks.
And maybe think of it a different way. It might not be that explicit, but maybe they don't say that to you, but what they're thinking is okay, I'm going to introduce them to these key people, and just part of what they're looking at is they want to see well, I want to see what they think about it, well, wow. One thing that would make me really like this company is if that person was I want to go join them. It might not be the only thing, but that might be one thing they're thinking when they're making that intro.
Okay, I'll ask it. Does Live Oak rise above the 1 to 2% startup funds for women nationally?
Meaning funding female
Sure.
entrepreneurs.
Correct.
What's the question?
Are they more likely to fund female entrepreneurs than the national average?
So I don't have the data on our portfolio, but I'll tell you how we approach teams. So our investors are, like I said, the pension funds in town, national groups that are, representing money for individuals like all of you in the room, and they've tasked us with generating the most returns that we can get. And so we don't set benchmarks that we want to have X women founders or minority or Y and Z. We want to fund the best teams we can find, and often the best teams we can find are diverse teams. So it may be that they have female founders, it may be that they have folks from diverse backgrounds. I think we see in Austin a lot more diversity kind of racially and ethnically than we do with female founders, and there's a lot of interesting groups. Capital Factory has a number of women in tech that are helping to provide opportunities for female founders, but it's not an area where we've set targets.
But how many companies are in Fund 1?
There's 18, and I know.
So since I know at least one of them is
Yeah.
a female CEO or founder, you must, again, small sample size, but you
Alright.
must be above the national
Yeah,
average.
well, I'm thinking,
if you
like,
got 1 out of 18.
there's like-
so,
there's
and
like-
there's probably more than one. I know at least one. So
There's a statistic that I wish I had, which is if you think of a management team as 5 people, within the portfolio, there's probably an average of 20 to 40% of the management teams are female. So two of those 5 spots are females, kind of as I go through the head and the Rolodex of portfolio companies. But the women at True Wealth are doing an awesome job with a fund that's specifically focused on women entrepreneurs, and we would love to do deals with them because they see the cream of the crop of companies that are female founded.
we are definitely way over that number. I think we're at. I think it's either 25% or 33% of ours. So awesome. Well, I think that's probably a good break point. So thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to. And from here, we're going to go to the happy hour. But before we do, I just want to point out a couple people in the room. Inevitably after this. First of all, inevitably after this, people line up in the middle here and want to come talk to us. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go straight to the kitchen. So if you want to talk to us, come to the kitchen. It's a better format to go do that. Some other people, just so that it's not a line of people to talk to me, although I'd love to talk to all of you. Jamie in the back is one of our venture associates. And so if any of you, he knows about all this kind of stuff we've been talking about and talks to lots of companies and sees them. But in particular, if you are interested in getting involved in Capital Factory, either being part of our accelerator or anything else about it, he's someone that could answer a lot of questions about that. Erin also is on our team here. She's, Erin, what is your role today? I don't even know. I think it just changed, didn't it?
Community engagement and VRAR.
Oh, the VRAR is the new part of that. So she's on our community team and knows a lot of the companies here, also working a lot with VR and AR. So another person you could talk to. Is there anybody else I'm not seeing? I don't think so.
Mary Ann might be over there already.
Okay.
Accelerator events coordinator.
Great. And any of them could talk to you about becoming a member here or anything like that too. So with that, I think we'll call it a wrap. And thank you all for coming. And like I said, there's probably some snacks and some drinks and stuff over in the kitchen if you want to go over there. Thanks.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's the same time I see that tech, there's so much good stuff. I'm like wanting to take pictures myself and go pull down stuff.
Every month